Okay, it's 12:05. Thank you to everyone who is logging in today to watch Partners of Scott County Watershed's August virtual forum. My name is Cassie Druhl, and I'm the coordinator of Partners. And we are presenting this today with John Cope from the city of Muscatine. And before we get started with him, I'm going to give you a little bit of background about who we are. Partners of Scott County Watersheds is a nonprofit whose goal is to improve the stewardship of Scott County watersheds through education, technical guidance, and volunteer opportunities. One of the ways we do this is by providing these educational forums once a month to the general public. Normally we would have them at the Davenport libraries, but during the COVID time, we are doing them virtually. So hopefully in the near future, we'll be able to host them in person again. Another way that we do this is we provide volunteer opportunities in the form of stream cleanups and also regular water quality monitoring, in which we train volunteers on how to test local watersheds in Scott County. Also, we provide citizens of Scott County with technical guidance. So if you have a water quality issue that you're looking to solve, or if you are interested in putting some sort of water quality improvement project on your property, you can reach out to us and we can connect you with the right resources and professionals who can assess your issue and see what the solutions are. So we do have a membership and partnership program. This money helps us continue to provide these forums as well as purchase water quality testing materials for our snapshot water quality monitoring events, and also to host other special workshops throughout the year. So if you're interested in donating, you can go to partnersofscottcountywatersheds.org and click the support us button, or you can reach out to me and I can direct you on how to donate. The next date of the forum is Tuesday, September 15th. More details will follow on our social media pages, and we also have an email listserv that you can sign up for on our website if you're not already on there. Our next snapshot is Tuesday, October 6th from 8 to noon, and that's going to be at the Bettendorf Surrey Heights Fire Station. We are going to post registration information for that shortly on extremecleanup.org. So if you're interested in volunteering, stay tuned for that. And with that, I will let John start his presentation. Oh.
Okay, we're going to go on. I just wanted to thank everybody for inviting me to come here. My name is John Cook. I am the director of the Muscatine Water Resource Recovery Facility. I guess the water quality aspects of what we do around here is kind of the subject of what everybody wanted to talk about. So I will go through some of the water quality things that Muscatine has been working on in the last few years. Some pretty exciting things have been going on down here. Of course, we're just downstream from all of you. But in the same copper stuck watershed as you as well, so we do have some things in common. So the first few things I'm going to go through will be some of the history of what wastewater treatment is. Some people don't really know what wastewater treatment is when we talk about that. Some of the sustainability efforts that Muscatine is currently doing. This thing called the Nutrient Energy Water Nexus, which is kind of exciting to say the least. And then this thing called the MARR movement, which is something that we've come up with here in Muscatine that we're all really excited about and looking forward to some growth in that area as well. So get right into it. So I like to put out this this timeline when I give these talks, just so kind of people have an understanding about what we're talking about when we say wastewater treatment. What we're really talking about is clean water healthcare, because from a very long time ago, people figured out that for some reason they didn't know before microorganisms were discovered, but dirty water where people went to the bathroom in and everything, made people sick. So we see lots of things starting all the way back in 3500 BC with community sanitation and lavatory systems in Scotland, all the way back to 3500 BC. If you look at this timeline, there's all kinds of stuff involved in the ancient world, like using waste as fertilizer in China, all the way up through to the Roman sewer systems that everybody kind of knows about a lot, right here in the middle of the timeline. And then, of course, there was just this gap. There was nothing in between during the Dark Ages. Science kind of took a back seat, and everybody just kind of let things roll, and there was just rampant disease like cholera and typhoid and everything else like that. Until we get to the Middle Ages in London, which is the largest city in the world at that time, and 60s is where this problem really started to become apparent, mostly where the Thames River smelled like death, they said, all the way up until 1850s during what they called the Great Stink. If you can imagine, the Thames River doesn't actually flow very well at times of high tide. So the water would just sit stagnant in the river, and everything was dumped directly into the river, just sit there as a giant cesspool running through the middle of town, basically. So, and people were getting sicker and sicker, and people started finally figuring out to close wells down so that people would stop getting sick. So when we talk about the environmental benefits of wastewater treatment, people generally think that's all we really do, but this all came about because of healthcare, because of keeping people safe and protecting the public health. So some of the fun things that happened in our century, if you look back, or the last century, I guess now, the Clean Water Act in 1972 formed the EPA, which really gave us the biggest mandate for all that we do in water quality. And then towards the 90s, we started looking towards stormwater. We really had a pretty good handle on how to treat the wastewater that came in. The next thing that they wanted to look at then was the stormwater, the runoff that came out of urban areas and into the streams and rivers, and created what's called an MS4 city, municipal separate storm sewer system. I think that's the 4 S's or something. I may have gotten that wrong, I'm sorry. Then of course, we have in 2013, Iowa came out with the nutrient reduction strategy. There have been many states kind of piecemeal doing this on their own, and so it kind of is tailored directly to what Iowa produces. Of course, being a large agricultural state, most of that is focused on the ag side of this, but the nutrient regulations came down mostly to wastewater treatment facilities because they call it end of pipe. So they can measure it, they can see that what we're putting out right at the end of the pipe, and then they can regulate based on that. And we'll get into that a little bit here later in the talk, because that becomes very important when we talk about what we're doing within our watershed. Then Muscatine has come about to becoming what we call now a water and resource recovery facility instead of just a wastewater plant, and all the fun stuff that we're doing in our food waste to energy recovery efforts. If anybody has ever done any work with sustainability, you know that when we have sustainable building projects or anything else like that, it really focuses on the 3 Ps, the people, planet, and prosperity. And when those things link up the best, you have sustainability right in the middle. If you look at the Venn diagram at the bottom, all of those issues are all very important on their own. When you link all of them together in one project, you have what we call a sustainable project, meaning that it is something that we will carry forward. It's not sitting on its own. It actually has lots of different benefits to the community and to the world and everything else around it. So when we build programs in Muscatine, we try to focus on where we can best fit in that sustainability model. So particularly the food waste to energy project that we did, which we'll talk about, the nutrient reduction projects that we do, and all the other little things that we're going to talk about today, we try to make sure they're all fitting right in the center of that sustainability model that we have. So the first part of our goal was to change our, not just change our name, but change our vision. You can see that all the way back from 1965 when we opened, called the sewage treatment plant. You may say, well, before 1965, what happened to all the wastewater coming out of town? And I have to tell you that it all went right out into the Mississippi River. And that happened everywhere, pretty much. There were very few treatment plants that were actually treating down to clean water levels. So most of that waste and everything else just got dumped directly into the rivers. Pretty disgusting, but that's what they did. So you can see it took about 10 years, and about every 20 years or so, we've evolved and changed our name again from wastewater to water pollution control, all the way today to the Water and Resource Recovery Facility. It fits better with what we're doing. We're not just water pollution, we're not just wastewater. We are evolving into something new. Recovering resources and transforming water is kind of our new neat little catchphrase, I guess you could say. So what are the resources that we're recovering specifically? I have a list here of the top 7 or so, but of course there's other things that may be involved in that, but these are the ones that we're really focused on. First one, of course, is water. That's the biggest resource that we get here at the plant, to the tune of 5 million gallons a day. So we're going to try to use that for irrigation whenever possible, because the Mississippi River doesn't really care that I put 5 million gallons back into the river. The next thing we'll focus on is nutrients, specifically nitrogen and phosphorus for fertilizer, which we apply to about 600 acres of land. Now, of course, there's other kinds of micro constituent nutrients that are in the biosolids that we do create here at the plant, but nitrogen and phosphorus are the ones that everybody focuses on the most because of the harmful effects of that goes out into the rivers and eventually makes it out to the Gulf of Mexico. We're also recovering wetlands. We know that wetlands were very abundant in Iowa back in the day. They helped reduce flooding, and they were called Earth's kidneys. They would actually filter the water before it went back out into the receiving streams. We have dried up most of the wetlands in Iowa, and so we're trying to put some of those back very strategically and utilize their benefits to us. Of course, we're going to make energy here now to the tune of about 1,000 gallons a day of vehicle fuel. If you didn't know that your utility could do that, they can if they try hard enough. So that's what we're trying to do here. We're recovering organics in the form of food waste. About 30% now we're finding out of waste in a landfill is organic waste. So we're trying to knock that down by taking some of it here, making energy out of it, and so that it does not go to the landfill. We're also recovering prairie ground. We know that the pollinators are suffering, the birds and the bees and butterflies and things of that nature. Prairies are great at sequestering carbon. Most people don't know that, but they are better than any forest, Amazon forest or anything else like that, at sequestering carbon, which is a big, and we've eliminated most of our prairies in Iowa. About 80% of the land was covered at one time. We're down to about 0.1%. And then, of course, we're going to recover some revenue. These projects that we're talking about are actually revenue positive, and everybody in town likes to hear about that. And if you want to know how to do that, we can show you some of these things. So the number one thing we have is the water recovery that we're doing, this nexus that we talked about, and what's described as utility of the future today. So future utilities, when they're built, are not just going to be wastewater treatment facilities. They're going to create energy, they're going to recover nutrients, and they're going to reuse the water that comes in and to make us more of a sustainable utility. So the irrigation, we can actually send this water, Muscatine, out to some farm fields about 2 miles away. We pump our biosolids out to these lagoons that hold our biosolids all year long. And then we land apply those. Well, we could use the same pipe and we can use the same lagoons to store water all summer long. And then we can actually irrigate the farm ground around that area. We do have a study going on right now to hopefully tell us that it's going to be feasible to do that. We'll see here in a few months when that study is completed, but that you get higher crop yields from that. the fertilizer. There's nutrients in the water, so the farmers can reduce the amount of fertilizer they have to apply, and it helps them protect against drought periods. So the next thing we talk about reducing or recovering are nutrients. Why would we do that? Well, because we actually produce a lot of the nitrogen and phosphorus that comes out of that center part of the country. If you see all the colored states there, every single one of those actually ends up dumping out into the Gulf of Mexico through New Orleans, through the same point. And you may not think that it would, but yes, actually, most of the states in the nation actually end up dumping out through the Mississippi Basin. So when we are the ones that are producing most of the nitrogen and phosphorus in our area, we are going to be the target of lots and lots of projects that need to be done. And of course, the reason that needs to be done is because of what's called Gulf hypoxia, or the dead zone. If you look at the picture here and you look into the Gulf, you see that yellow area here and the red along the coastline, and even all the way out into this area where we have oxygen depletion in the Gulf itself. Because of that little picture in the corner, you see that we send nutrients down the rivers into the Gulf. The algae grow and then die and fall to the bottom, and bacteria down there are anaerobic and they suck all the oxygen out of the water. So you could say that, you know, it affects, you know, each and every individual farmer, but very small amounts. But when you take the collective land area that we have out there, you can see that it does have a very big effect on the Gulf. And 2020 was actually a good year. It only did 2,100 square miles of dead zone, which is still an awfully lot of mileage. But then 2017 was the largest one ever recorded since they started tracking this in the 90s. 8,700 square mile dead zone, the size of the state of New Jersey. It was just massive, and it's devastating to the fishing industry and to the ecology just of the Gulf itself. So something that has to be done about it, and we are slowly trying to turn the ship. Unfortunately, with all the efforts and all the things that we've been doing over the last 10, 15 years or so, the nutrient loading is just going up. It has not gone down. So these things that we've been doing obviously are not working. So we're going to try new things. Some of the things that we have requirements within our permit. We have a permit from the DNR to discharge, and now they're starting to add things that say that have nutrients attached to it. We have to report the feasibility. We have to evaluate our operations to see where exactly we can reduce nitrogen and phosphorus by 66 and 75% respectively. But we are allowed to select the way that happens, report it out, and then say, hey, here's a way that we want to reduce nutrients in the watershed surrounding us, or what we have effect on. And one of the better ways to do that is within the watershed through these wetlands or through other practices, even edge of field practices or anything else like that. And then we can have credit for that. We can take that instead of having to do really, really expensive projects here at the treatment facility. We can actually affect greater reduction outside of our fence line and find better ways to do that saves us money, that actually reduces more nutrients and helps the farmers become more sustainable in their practices as well. So this is kind of a neat thing. The Butte has actually gotten the first permission to do this. They have a letter of understanding, I think, is about as close as we get to permission to have this trading procedure going on, but it is happening. It's very exciting, and Muscatine is hot on the heels of the DNR to get this done as well. One of the other fun ways that we're looking at doing that is through using algae itself. Locally, we can take our effluent, we can run it through either big glass tubes, or we can run it through these serpentine belts, actually dip down into the effluent, grow algae, and then we scrape the algae off, and that algae has contained the phosphorus and the nitrogen. And so there are other means of doing that mechanically. Otherwise, we have to do some really, really big, expensive things within our own treatment facility that takes care of only a small percentage of the problem. So we're really trying to look outside of our fence line to do that. And one of the best ways to do that is through wetlands. If you don't know about wetlands, I'm sure most of you do. But what the main function of these is to take ag or urban runoff and run it through a natural process to remove these nutrients. So you have the first sediment basin actually takes out the heavy sediment where a lot of the phosphorus is stored. Then you have plants along the way that actually uptake the rest of those nutrients as it sits in the wetland. And of course, the biggest flush of nutrient comes out of the first 1 inch of rain that comes down. So you always have this high flow bypass so that the first flush of water that comes off of a field or out of your town will go to the treatment process. But then as it continues to rain, as you get more and more water coming down, it doesn't just wash out your whole process. If you try to put all the water that rained through a wetland or through any kind of a stormwater practice, you'd end up washing out that all the nutrients and all the good stuff that you had stored. So you have a high flow bypass as it keeps raining to go around the practice. But these are just some of the things that you can look on to see what happens inside of a wetland that we're trying to encourage. So Muscatine has a couple of interior urban wetlands that we're going to be using a lot more than they're being used right now. Up in the upper corner there, I don't know if maybe it's blocked out because mine is, it says this is the slough, which actually takes about 1,400 acres of urban runoff. And then it is pumped basically under the street and continues on until it eventually makes it out into the Mississippi River. So what we're trying to do is we're going to pump it to a couple of the wetlands that we have in that map that you see there, instead of just pumping it straight out into the environment. So those wetlands hopefully will be able to take a lot of those nutrients, and we can get some credit for that to say that we have reduced the nutrient load to our watershed without having to do something in our treatment plant. This is a really fun area, actually. The Muscatine Pollinator Park has just been a real joy of mine to develop. It was an old ag land that had been sitting fallow for a very long time. We just mowed it, or the city mowed it for weeds, and eventually somebody asked me to mow it, and then I said, well, I want it for something else. And so we have converted it into a park where we have many, many acres of restored prairie, woodland restoration, and of course these two wetlands that we're going to be using here. So, plus they build an off-leash dog park there, which is kind of cool. If you ever come down to Muscatine for a soccer game or something like that, you can access all of this stuff, and I encourage you to do so. There's a walking trail, a 1 mile walking and biking trail around the whole park with some informational signs and things like that along the way. It's really a cool place, especially this time of year. If you're looking for something to get out and do, I encourage you to come down and see it. It's pretty cool. So the big thing that Muscatine has really been doing here lately is our energy and organics recovery. We created a program called MARR, which is the Muscatine Area Resource Recovery for Vehicles and Energy. This is a food waste recovery effort that we have been working on for, gosh, 7, 8 years now, 3 years really in the design and construction. So we finally finished that and have been running this facility since February of this year, and just going gangbusters with that. This program is based on the EPA's food recovery hierarchy. If you remember the food pyramid, this is kind of inverted pyramid with the best things to do up top and the least desirable things at the bottom. So source reduction, of course, is always the best thing to do, and MARR actually helps with that as well. We're trying to help food banks and grocery stores link up so that we can actually not have the food wasted in the first place. That way we can feed hungry people, which is of course what food is for in the first place. So we want to make sure we encourage that, and that we're not just trying to take in waste to make energy out of it, because the most important thing would be to link people up or feed the animals that then feeds the people, right? So we're kind of sitting there in the middle, this industrial spot, which is, you know, we're the fourth best option for food waste once it makes it to that point. But of course, that's just the inevitability of mass production of food. We end up with a lot of waste. And of course, manufacturers don't like that. They try to do their best to not have that. It's just profit right out of their pockets. But you do end up with an awful lot of things that are not able to go out. And so we're kind of cashing in on that to make sure that we can help avoid that going to just the landfill and sitting in the landfill producing methane and taking up space and all that kind of stuff. So we can turn food waste into energy, fertilizer, and clean water, and that's really the highlight of what this is showing here. So what started us all out, if you look at the picture on the left, is this flame going off, and of course the baseball field behind it, which is kind of cool. It's a neat picture. We got a lot of calls when that first turned on. They thought we were on fire, but it's actually just burning off the methane from our anaerobic digesters. And when I saw that, I said there has to be some way of using that energy as opposed to just burning it off. And we did. We're looking at that very, very closely right now. And when I started seeing 10 tons of food waste a day from one industry going to the landfill, we said, okay, we got to figure out some way of getting that food out of the package into our digesters so we can make more energy. Because unfortunately, it looks like there's a lot of energy and flame coming off of that, but we're actually a pretty small fish in the larger ocean of energy projects, and nobody really wanted to help us out or pay much attention to us until we produced more biogas. So that was where we headed next. The reason why we weren't going to get anything done is because you either have to have a grant, a mandate, or what I like to call a screw loose, of course. We probably fall into that category. So it's really easy to do things when you get a grant because they just kind of dump some money on your plate and here you go, make a project like they did in Janesville, Wisconsin. No offense to Janesville, they did a great job, but they had a lot of money given to them to do that. Or if you live in California, like in San Diego Food Bank, they have a mandate. They cannot throw food waste into the landfill. It's against law. Coming up, it's not really completely implemented yet, but they're really scrambling to find ways to deal with this food waste once they actually take care of it. But all the way down to the food banks, they had to buy something to actually depackage food that they received that then they could not give to people because it expired or spoiled or something like that. And then of course the other part of the picture is just people who just want to do it because it's the right thing to do. And there's a few of us, there's not many of us that have this screw loose mentality of just going out there and doing it anyway. I found one in Hermitage, Pennsylvania. Other than that, there aren't very many of us out there that are really doing the big things that we're talking about doing. If you look at the picture over there in San Diego, that's Larry Hall. That's Hare. I'm sorry. He's the director of the Des Moines plant. They do lots and lots of liquid receiving of food waste, grease interceptors, all different kinds of stuff, and they make tons and tons of gas. And they have a great program going. We're just taking that step one further, and we're actually doing this packaged food waste like they do in Hermitage, Pennsylvania. And the way we do that is through something we call the Muscatine Organics Recycling Center, or MORC. And this is the machine that does all that for us. And to set this all up, this is actually inside of our old recycling center that we took over, because now everybody has single sort recycling, so you don't actually need to go through the process of sorting out all your plastics and metals and paper and everything else like that. So we took this over, we put in this machine, and this machine will take all the packaged waste and get it into a form where we can put it into our digesters. And I have a blank screen there, sorry. This is the view of that from the back. The floor out in front of that truck is where we'll actually dump a lot of loose organic waste, like from grocery stores, and then we scoop it up and we dump it into the machine. We created this push wall here for that, so that's really the only thing we added to this space that we have. And then the tanker, of course, is how we deliver the liquid organic waste after it's been depackaged to the treatment facility, which is just down the street. So we're only about a block away, which is kind of convenient. So we go from this is grocery store waste from multiple Hy-Vees along the Mississippi. This company, Green RU, collects all that waste in these red bins. If you look out behind your Hy-Vees, your local Hy-Vees, you probably see some of those red bins. And you can notice that there's a lot of things in there that have gone that have spoiled but are still in packaging, and they would not have been able to send that to compost because the composters don't want all the packaging waste with it. They'll take a raw head of cauliflower, but it goes over here is a head of lettuce wrapped in plastic, and they don't want that one. So we're able to collect a lot more than just the typical composters can accept. So the waste that they're able to divert to beneficial reuse has really gone up, which is great. So we go from that to this, and this is actually just you can see it's just some packaging, and all that food has now been recovered out of the packaging. We can get between 90 and 99% organic removal from our packaging, which is really good. So that stuff didn't have to go to the landfill. I have a little video here.
We are ready to load a case of milk in cartons, filled in their boxes. No problem for the T42. The operator will load it into the feeding hopper by rotating the fork, dropping the material into the feed augers, which lifts the material into the machine. Fork rotates, the material goes in. Then set up the auger into the T42. Milk comes out the bottom, where it is then pumped to a tanker for delivery to the treatment facility. The waste cardboard boxes go up this auger, comes out this chute, and is dropped into this bin for disposal. That's the only part that will actually go to landfill at this point, and hopefully we can do something with it later.
Oops. Now I have to figure out how to go backwards. Here we go. Okay. Whoops. Yep, that's not going to do it, is it? Sorry, everybody. Don't get dizzy watching this as it goes by. So when we talk about going to anaerobic digester, this is the process of actually breaking down those solid wastes into liquid fertilizers that we use and gas and methane gas. So on the right-hand side are the new digesters that we built in Muscatine in 2010, and those are floating covers that actually capture methane underneath them, and we can then use that for energy in many different ways. The left side are the old digesters that we had before they got built in 2010. Now what we're going to be able to do is actually convert one of those, there's 4 of them there, they each hold about 400-some thousand gallons, to what you see below. It says DVO on the side, and it's actually a different kind of an anaerobic digester. I don't want to get too far into it right now. If you ever come down and want to know all about anaerobic digesters and how we're changing those around, I'll be happy to talk to you about them. But they're actually used in the agricultural industry an awful lot. They help break down large quantities of high-strength waste, and we're going to use that because it fits better with how we are already set up to take that waste instead of building brand new digesters like we have on the right. So this is, of course, we talked about MARR being Muscatine Area Resource Recovery for vehicles and energy. So the vehicle and energy part of this, we're talking about converting that methane to CNG, or compressed natural gas. I actually like to call it RNG. I don't do that. That's actually an industry thing. But so RNG is renewable natural gas, and we can actually compress that and put it into vehicles that are set up to take natural gas, like these trucks. And this is happening a lot in different parts of the country, mostly out in California, where they have a lot of issues with emissions and things like that. So we can actually compress and inject this into the national pipeline. People can off-take that as fuel for their trucks, and then we get a credit for it. It's a pretty neat process of how we do that. This is actually a carbon negative fuel because we have taken what would have created a lot of methane and made a fuel out of it that now only burns carbon dioxide. So it's a carbon credit that we get for that. But this is where we are heading with this, we hope, to the tune of about 1,000 some gallons of fuel equivalent a day that we're going to be able to create here. You know, remember how I said that your utility could say they could make 1,000 gallons of fuel a day? Why aren't they doing it? Well, hopefully more of them will start doing that because we're pretty small potatoes, and I think other larger facilities can make a lot more than we can even. So moving along to the next thing that we're recovering, the prairies that we look at. We have, of course, some opportunities at the pollinator park. That's going to be, it's about 55 acres all told when we add up everything, even inside of the fence at the transfer station. We're going to be not mowing. That's what we always talk about, is how can we stop mowing grass and return all these things to prairie as much as possible. You can see just a couple of examples at lift stations, but we have many, many more lift stations around town where we're doing this. These are just two of the biggest ones and the kind of the neatest ones that we've converted, where we would normally just be mowing this grass. We've converted it to prairie, and boy, it's just full of life every year. There's so many things that take advantage of that new area where mowing grass just doesn't provide any kind of food or any kind of habitat for our native species that really are struggling and need it. So lots and lots of these little places like this are doing us a whole lot of good. So we try to do that as many places as we can. We have over 100 acres now dedicated to prairie within the city of Muscatine, and growing. And then, of course, the final thing that we like to say we're recovering is revenue. There's a lot of this waste that we bring in, of which would just be going to landfill. Now we can actually convert it, and we can make some money for the city out of it, which everybody likes. And this is how these projects really get done, because we can say, look, this is not a revenue negative, it's a revenue positive project, where we're actually going to be able to say we can pay to take care of this project ongoing. You see there, we figure about $265,000 a year, which is salaries for the employees, the equipment replacement, and all kinds of things like that. But we're going to bring in at least $365,000 a year in tipping fees. So we charge $40 a ton for all the waste that comes in, and that money then goes back to funding the program and making a little bit of revenue. And of course, then we have tax revenue as well on top, which everybody likes. So when I was talking about this to my city council and everybody else, they were saying, yes, let's go for it. Let's go ahead, because really the downside is that something, that we're not doing this. The worst thing would be to say, well, we're just not going to go for it because it's too hard, or we're not motivated enough to do so, or we don't want the hassle. Well, here we are. We can say that we have some good payout from this. Of course, once we start actually compressing and selling the gas, there's going to be an additional revenue on the other side of that. I hate to speculate, but it could be between $300,000 and $500,000 a year. That's what people say they are making who have similar projects like this. So there really is a great benefit to the community, to the bottom line, and everybody kind of wins on this scenario when we do these projects. One of the things we're looking at, hopefully getting people to be more involved in, is the eRIN market. These RINs are renewable energy credits, and an eRIN is if you make electricity out of biomass or out of waste, then you can actually get a credit for that because of the burgeoning and the growing electric vehicle market. And if you're recharging your electric vehicle, then we can actually have credit for that go towards our project and make a renewable energy credit out of that. One of the other resources we're doing, of course, is the mussels of Muscatine. This is a program of volunteers that started out, which I'm involved in, but the city is actually helping this program move forward to where we can recover these old buildings that have some historic value as far as the clean water initiatives that were happening in Iowa a long time ago. They didn't know that's why they were doing it. They actually were trying to figure out why the mussels were all dying and how to get them back. Well, it's because we harvested them all to make pearl buttons out of, and then we dump toxic industrial waste into the Mississippi River, and believe it or not, all the mussels died. But you know, these things were so prolific back in the 1800s that the old riverboat captains used to gripe about them because they were so abundant that it was hard to navigate through. And if you can only imagine how clean that river must have been at that time, with just billions and billions of these mussels in there, just cleaning the water as it came down to 15 gallons a day. One of these little mussels can clean 15 gallons of water a day. So if you can imagine, if we can get these back into our rivers and back into our stream systems, how much water can we clean? Passive cleaning. I mean, there's no energy involved. There's nothing that we have to do. These little creatures, if we support them, if we get them into our rivers and streams again, how much cleaner our water systems can really be. The potential is just incredible. So we're encouraging that, and we're working with as many of these groups as we can to get these things back into our ecosystems. Okay, so we're kind of at the end here on this. Some of the things that we just need to talk about, you know, if anybody is interested in starting one of these projects, 3 to 5 years is really even the best that you're going to find of building a program like our waste to energy. It just takes a lot of time of getting everything lined up. We take material from all over the region. We're getting it from out of state. We're getting it from everybody within the couple hundred miles. They're driving this material to us. So there's a lot out there. There's plenty for everybody. I think if anybody else will start building a program like this. And we have been using people. We've been getting together with other producers of biogas to say, hey, let's not compete, let's work together. And we have a big grant with the EPA right now. The University of Iowa is helping us with that. Craig Just from the university is saying, you know, is helping guide the programs in the area to say, let's all work together because everybody does their own thing a little bit differently. So we can not compete, but work together. But there needs to be some kind of incentives or grants for this. This was completely self-funded through the city of Muscatine. We had some reserves. We have called plant replacement reserves. That means we save some money so that the next time we have to have a big project, which happens about every 20 to 25 years, we have that money there to offset the cost so we don't have to get loans every time that we do that. So that money was there, and we used that because we could say, you know, we're going to replace that money plus some and have some residual income. But a lot of places don't have that luxury. There just isn't the money, there isn't the availability for that, and there just aren't any incentives or grants right now for people to be doing that. So we need to encourage our lawmakers to do some more of that kind of thing. And then on the agricultural side, you know, there's a lot of volunteer things that they can do, but there just isn't a lot of mandate for that. So the farmers, they want to take care of the land as well, but it's very difficult and it's expensive. And so we need to have some more of those things come down the pike that we can say, look, we'll come out and help you, but we need to know where you're going to end up, and that has to be ongoing. It can't be something like, you know, some of these things where we plant prairie and then 10 years later somebody wants to put it back into agriculture and then all that prairie is gone again. So it needs to be more regulated as well. So as I say, waste has always been with us. Now we make it work for us. So I'm going to open it up to questions. I hope everybody's still there. I've just been babbling and talking on. So.
Thank you, John. That was a great presentation. Lots of cool stuff happening in Muscatine. Again, if anyone has questions, feel free to type them either in the chat or the Q&A, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. We have one question, and then go ahead. If anyone else has any more, please type them in. Kay is asking what mandates should be put on ag producers. I don't know if you need to elaborate, Kay, or John, do you have any ideas of what types of mandates might work well?
I think they just need to have some guidance. Maybe a mandate isn't entirely the right word. You know, I mean, we're mandated as a treatment facility through the DNR. The DNR says you can only discharge 10 milligrams per liter of nitrogen out of your end of pipe. Farmers have to have something like that, but that's really hard for a farmer to do because it's so intermittent and things just change and are different for them. And there has to be something different for the farmer to say, okay, look, you have to do some kind of practice on the end. That doesn't mean you have to meet the same limits that we meet, but there has to be something done. We can't just continuously say, well, farms don't, you know, just kind of get a pass for a lot of this stuff, or we just keep doing things voluntarily. And a lot of farmers do it voluntarily. And that's great that they do it. Unfortunately, the nitrogen and phosphorus levels just keep going up. We just keep seeing more and more of this stuff leaving the state instead of less. So the voluntary work isn't really getting us where we need to be. So some kind of word from the EPA or somebody that says, look, we have the ability to do this. We need to see more of it happening. And the mandate could be you find a utility nearby that wants to reduce nitrogen and phosphorus, and we'll come out and we'll put some stuff in for you and pay for it and take care of it. That way the farmer doesn't have to do any of it, and we get the credit for it. And then that's kind of one of the things that we're hoping. But yeah, buffers, end of field tiles, I mean, all those things, the tiles that come off the farms, I mean, the tiles have been going in like crazy. And I understand why. Of course, it makes sense. You know, you get a lot more production out of the wet areas that you have. So at the end of those tiles, let's put in some of these bioreactors. You know, they're just filled with wood chips and things, and they seem to be able to knock down those nutrients pretty well. But they're expensive to put in, and they're hard to take care of long term. Some of these other utilities that are looking to help do this could be the answer for that.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and wait just a couple seconds to see if there's any other questions that pop up. Okay, I don't think I see any more questions, but thank you, John, for your presentation, and thank you to everyone who attended today. If you have more questions about what Partners of Scott County Watersheds does, feel free to contact me or go to our website, partnersofscottcountywatersheds.org. Or if you're interested in learning more about what John does, I think he shared his contact info, or you can also reach out to me and I can share that with you. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.